If you're one of the millions of people who were laid off or had to drastically change their career paths during the pandemic, then how you spent your money and organized your finances was probably top of mind. But it isn't like we had a handbook on how to be financially responsible during a global pandemic, so most of us have been doing the best we can. If nothing else, the pandemic gave us all an opportunity to think a lot more about the health of ourselves and our families. And if you're like most of us, you probably also spend a lot of time thinking about how you spend your money and what it means to be financially secure. But what lessons did this teach us? Have we improved our spending and savings habits? Or are we returning to how we lived before? I'm Kim, and in today's video, I'd like to explore what the pandemic has taught us about personal finance and what that means for our futures. And I think some of these items may just surprise you. Let's get started. If you are new to managing your own money, there are 3 goals you should focus on first: building an emergency fund, making a budget and keeping track of your spending, and getting out of debt. First, let's talk about an emergency fund. A full emergency fund should be enough to cover expenses for 3 to 6 months. You need an emergency fund because life isn't always predictable, and sometimes you'll have to pay a very large, unexpected bill that could throw you off track. Many experts in personal finance say that putting together an emergency fund should be your first goal if you're just starting out on this path. Also, you should always have enough money in your emergency fund. That means that if you need to use the fund for some reason, you should put all of your other savings goals on hold until the emergency fund is full again. The next thing to learn is how to make a budget and keep track of it. If you are not sure where your money is going and don't know what to do about it, you should keep track of your expenses regularly. At first, this may seem completely pointless, since you're probably just copying your expenses from your bank statement or writing in where you spend your pocket money by hand. But tracking your expenses is more like a scan of your spending habits than just a list of numbers. You will find out how often you spend money and whether or not you can cut back. Trust me, most of you will be shocked when you start doing this. Keeping track of your expenses every day on a simple Excel or Google spreadsheet is a good way to make sure you're doing this without having to do it every month or week, which can be a lot of work because the numbers add up pretty quickly. I keep track of my own expenses every day, and I use Google spreadsheets because I can access them from anywhere without having to worry about the file's integrity. Don't just list your expenses if you want to keep track of them. Taking your analysis of your finances one step further can make a big difference in the long run. For example, make sure you're putting your expenses into categories so you can see which ones take up the most of your budget. You can also add comments and reminders. Mark which expenses were necessary and which ones you want to avoid in the future. And mark which expenses are things you may want to cut back on or get rid of altogether. Also, use this time to learn to ask questions instead of just agreeing to your expenses. Questions to ask include: can I live without it? Should I get it? How much can I spend? Can I cut back or lower this cost? These questions will help you find small ways to save money. Personal finance, like other parts of your life, can be a mindful process that helps you figure out what to do first when it comes to managing your money. In this case, it's about what you should put first in your life and what you should do less of. You can try out or even use some interesting budgeting rules of thumb if they make sense for you in your situation. The 50-30-20 rule is a popular budgeting rule that says you should spend 50% of your income on necessities, like housing and bills, 30% on one-time and personal purchases, and 20% on financial goals like paying debt or saving for retirement. Another version of this is a 70-20-10 rule, which says that you should save 70% of your net salary for living costs, 20% for savings, and 10% for paying off debt. In this case, the advice is to pay off the debt that will hurt you the most first, and then pay off the rest as quickly as possible. Rule number 1 says that you should decide how you'll spend your money before you decide how much you'll make. You need to decide what to do with your money as soon as you get it. Every dollar needs a job, and then you just have to stick to your plan. For example, if you still have $100 in your account after paying your bills and other necessary costs, give each of those $100 a job to do. For example, you might decide that you don't want to spend more than $50 eating out, $20 on new books, and $30 on new fitness equipment that month. The big bill prevention rule is used to avoid big payments, like an annual car repair or update, Christmas or birthday gifts, an annual weekend trip, etc. Once a year, add up all of these costs, including the money you want to set aside for gifts, regular car or house repairs, etc., and divide them by 12. Your goal is to pay for these out-of-the-ordinary costs every month. That way, when the bills come, you'll already have the money and won't have to go into more debt or spend more money. Let's keep going with making an account. If you have a specific financial goal in mind, you might want to set up different accounts to help you reach that goal. This depends on where you live and the laws in your country, of course. But there are times when you can open an account without having to pay commissions on a regular basis. In that case, it might be a good idea to set up automatic transfers to a new account for that goal. When you get paid, a certain amount will go into that account and you know you can't touch that money. This is exactly what my friend and her fiancé did to save money for their wedding. They opened a new bank account, set up a monthly transfer to happen automatically, and never asked for a credit or debit card to go with that account. That money was pretty much out of reach for regular expenses, unless they moved it to pay the vendors, caterers, etc. Personal finance is not just about saving money, keeping track of expenses, and spending less. It's also important to plan correctly for your taxes. Again, this depends on where you live, but you should be able to find a tax calendar for your country on the internet. You should organize your expenses and think about your tax bill, but you should also organize and keep track of the receipts you can use to lower your tax bill. Set up a plan for when your bills are due. If you can, try to pay all of your bills on the same day of the month. You can do this with different kinds of software or a paper planner. For example, if you have 10 bills to pay and they are all due at different times during the month, you will pay all 10 bills when the first one is due. Even if you're looking forward to paying your bills, you will pay everything on time and won't have to think about it for a whole month. Also, paying all of your bills and transferring money to your savings on the same day makes sure that any money left in your account is for your own spending. This makes it much easier to get through the month until the end of the month. Lastly, get into the routine of doing regular financial housekeeping. Think about how managing your own and your family's costs is a drawer. Hannah Witten was the first person I heard talk about this, and I think she's right. It may be something that only one person thinks about, but keeping track of budgets and remembering when to pay bills is a chore like any other. If you change the way you think, you might be able to get back some control over your personal finances. By putting these financial housekeeping sessions in your planner, you can check your accounts to make sure payments are coming in, file receipts, make sure you're paying your bills, and plan any other payments ahead of time. So what did the pandemic teach us about personal finance? I suppose it's probably a little bit different for each of us. But for me, it really helped me to prioritize and better understand the essentials of how I save and spend my money. I mentioned the 50-30-20 rule earlier, which deals with how you allocate your income to prepare for the future. I actually talked about this specific rule in a lot of detail in this video, so click here for a deep dive on that topic. See you there!